All right, thank you very much. I'd like to call Mayor Don Guardian to the podium. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yesterday, Commissioner Richmond rejected the 5-year financial plan submitted to him by the City of Atlantic City. He concluded that the plan, quote, is not likely to achieve financial stability, end quote. We're both disappointed and disagree with his report. We believe that there are a lot of inaccuracies and misinformation within their justification. They suggest that some of our conclusions are based on the lack of backup surrounding the justifications for the city's plan. We will be submitting a response with all of the backup that has been cited by the state and fully prepared by the consultants. Because we are still within the 150-day time frame to submit our complete plan, we will be taking full advantage of this by addressing all of the state's concerns and will hand deliver the report to the commissioner by the end of day tomorrow. Additionally, we'll meet with the state and their financial representatives if they choose. The plan is critical to the city and to the state. No other plan or solution has been put forward at this point. Having a plan in place allows the city to access bond markets at reasonable interest rates. The markets want a plan. The state does not have one. We do. We'll do everything in our power to make sure that this plan is implemented. We are appealing to the commissioner to understand the critical nature of this plan and reevaluate it on the accurate backup information that we will be providing tomorrow. I'm happy to introduce the Honorable Marty Small, our Council President.
Good afternoon, everyone. Firstly, let me just say to our resident taxpayers, businesses, and employees, I'm extremely disappointed in the state's political decision, because that's what we believe, that the decision was based on pure politics. Last Tuesday, we went up to the DCA and we gave them an opportunity for over 3 hours to ask us questions on the plan. They had no further questions. If this process was non-political, the questions that they asked and the questions that they rebutted in their report, they would have reached out to our professionals to, ask them to provide further clarity. They didn't do that. They took the 4 or 5 days as they told us that they would, and they made a decision that will be damaging for each of us in this room. It's important to know, make no mistake about it, the state has never had a plan, never will have a plan, and in their 75 pages of nonsense, they didn't offer a plan. I think the report was disingenuous. It was extremely disrespectful. Their opinion was misguided, misinformed, and filled with politics. We've campaigned throughout the state of New Jersey, crisscrossing the state all last week, making our case. Legislatures, key stakeholders, everyone seemed to embrace the plan. It's also important to note that all of the criticism that they have for the city government, the state has oversaw every decision that we've made in the city of Atlantic City since 2010. And I can back that up. 2011, S11, the tourism district was supposed to turn things around on the boardwalk. What they did was turn everything upside down, with now 5 casinos closing on our famous boardwalk. That's simply failure from the state of New Jersey. Then they had 3 summits, all the developers and important people around the state converging at CRDA 3 times. No solutions. The solution was, we're going to bring in the guys from Detroit and they're going to turn this around. But the laws in Detroit was rather different, and it was important we said it at the time that we said it. it's key to note, out of those 3 summits, we got an emergency manager at the tune of $2.6 million of your money, and all he did was give us 2 reports. And everyone in this room that read the report, it was nothing in that report that we didn't know. It's also important to know the definition. A report is findings. We're the only people to provide a plan, and that was the Atlantic City plan. And it's important to know, a report is findings, a plan is implementation. And for the first time, there was a plan to fiscal prudence for the city of Atlantic City, not only this year, but mandated by law the next 5 years. And that's important to note. They talk about some of the things that we wouldn't do politically to make decisions. You got to understand, we all see what's going on in Washington, the political environment. It's always a deadlock. The Republicans and the Democrats, disagree all the time. We had a unique situation here in Atlantic City. We have a Republican mayor, 8 Democratic councilmen, and 1 Republican. Rumored that a few of council will try to aspire higher to the mayor's position, but we were able to put all of that aside for the sake of everyone in this room to try to save Atlantic City and fight the good fight. Some of the things that we were criticized for is our cars. We checked that box. We turned in all cars from city council and urged the administration to do the same to reduce the fleet. We switched prescription, saving the city of Atlantic City $1 million. We all remember when Governor Christie had a press conference and talked about us that we're the only ones that's still on Direct 10. We moved to Direct 15. We put out RFP for services. Now understand, wildly unpopular politically decisions, but we had to do what we had to do to give us a fighting chance, and we did that. The health department and payroll has been outsourced to a tune of over $2 million savings for the city of Atlantic City. We sold land, got about $7 million on the books, as well as those properties coming back on the tax rolls. And not to mention, they tasked us to monetize the MUA. We did that. We did it with Betafield at the same time. As I stated in the meeting, we wanted it to be in public hands. It may not be in the public hands that they like, but it's in public hands. And it's a good plan. No one else offered the plan. And most importantly, it was council in the negotiations with the state that pushed for the early retirement incentives. If everything goes well and they accept it and they keep their word, we will have 192 people off the payroll. So the plan checked all the boxes. No tax increase for 5 years. Decreased budget. Our ask for state aid wanes. I mean, we actually decrease our ask for state aid. We trim the workforce. We outsource various departments, and we share services. And more importantly, we did this in the spirit of keeping the government with local control, having the people that you elected to make the decisions, not some rogue person from the state of New Jersey who will come down here and at 5 o'clock go home. The state, if this goes through, and listen, we're going to use every option. Listen, this fight is far from over. I don't believe in giving up. And it's important. It's important that we stand by residents, taxpayers, businesses, and employees throughout this ordeal. The legislation gives us options to appeal, and we're not going to share too much of a potential legal strategy, but this is far from over. It's just the beginning, because it's worth the fight. Because if the state of New Jersey comes here, they're going to give the residents of Atlantic City upwards to a 40% tax increase because they want us to raise taxes. This plan doesn't do that. They're going to buy assets. They're going to sell off to their friends, the inlet, and whatever, to the developers. And the people that's getting the jobs are going to be handpicked, their political people. And I just found, and I'm going to wrap up, I just found that the 75-page report was extremely disrespectful to the professionals who put in hard man hours. These people have worldwide reputations. And for the report to come back the way it did was extremely, I can't even speak on it, the level of disappointment. So we're going to get through this process. We're going to keep fighting the good fight. in spite of who's not with us. This will go on, and we'll fight to the bitter end because it's extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. As you can see, we have representatives from PFM, from NW Financial, and from McManaman in Scotland, as well as the Council President and myself. We'll be happy to take questions.
Don, I guess to get started here, just so that we understand, you're going to basically resubmit the plan with revisions and hope that Trenton will change its mind.
The report had so many inaccuracies, plus they said that they didn't have the opportunity to ask questions in more detail. But they did in their final report. They didn't in the 7 calendar days that they reviewed the plan. So we're taking the opportunity, line by line, through the 75 pages, to respond to each of their concerns. We're going to name the inaccuracies they have in the report, and we're providing the backup detail that they said they weren't aware of.
And if they're still not satisfied, what do you do after that?
Then we take the next action. We have 3 branches of government, and the judicial has always been there to come in to help the people of Atlantic City, and so the next step is going to be taking it to the court.
Can you name some of the inaccuracies? I know you said you're going to go line by line.
Yeah, there's so many of them. Did you want to just summarize? Yep, I'm sorry. Ed, did you want to?
Ed McManaman from McManaman, Scotland, and Bauman. When they analyzed the debt, it was the debt portion of this report. In our view, it was at least disingenuous and inaccurate. For instance, they point out that the $105 million bond ordinance for the city to fund Borgata will use up the city's borrowing capacity. By statute, this debt is deductible. It doesn't mean it's not payable, but it doesn't count against the borrowing capacity. They criticized the $105 million bond ordinance as if it's new debt. So I pointed out to the council several times and in the report that that debt already exists in a much larger number because it's to pay Borgata. And if this bond ordinance is adopted and Borgata is paid within 90 days, as represented we would do, that clears up the obligation that's at least on the books currently at a much larger amount. So currently, Borgata is taking a tax credit that's $32 million a year that they don't pay the city. So to suggest that a $105 million bond ordinance that has debt service of $4 million for the first 5 years and $7 million for the next 20 is somehow a bad policy is, in our view, at least either they didn't take the time to compare it to what already exists. They point out that the length of time to fund this tax appeal is unprecedented, 25 years. The tax appeal is unprecedented in terms of size. They also have a policy that determines the length of time, and this policy has been in place at the local finance board for years, certainly as long as I've been appearing before them, but the tax appeal process is based on an impact on the average taxpayer of $50. So that if you had a tax appeal that was going to cause a taxpayer to pay more than $50 in a given year, then they fund it, whether it's 2 years or 3 years or 10 years, based on what that amount is. The $4 million payment, the lower number, not even the $7 million number, the impact on a taxpayer is $90 to pay that each year. So it's way above the threshold that they use to determine the useful life. I'm not saying that the local finance board has to approve that just because that's their policy. They could do what they do, but this report makes no mention of that. It comments on issues that are, quote, policy-driven with regard to transition aid, but they make no issue with regard to this. So there are a number of other items that PFM is addressing with regard to budget-related items, but I characterized it to the mayor and to the council president as disingenuous because I believe that there was no effort made to find out, for instance, the schedule, the debt service schedule that NW put together. They point out that it doesn't have the maturity schedule or the interest rate. Well, in 3 minutes, you could figure out both of those from the chart that was done, that Dennis Enright's firm put together. Of course, we have all the backup. They mentioned that the Municipal Qualified Bond Act, which secures the bonds that would be issued by the city, is too new to the city compared to Newark and Trenton and Patterson and Perth Amboy and other places, and therefore access to the bond market is questionable because they won't rely on the Municipal Qualified Bond Act revenues being paid by the state. Now, we have clearly discussed that with underwriters, with bond insurers and other people, and if the state were to renege on whatever it is that the Municipal Qualified Bond Act payments are to the city, that would unravel the entire Municipal Qualified Bond Act program, which has been in place for 30-plus years or more. So that's a suggestion that has an innuendo to it that just is simply not borne out in reality. And there's a suggestion that you can't get into the bond market because they tried a couple of years ago, and they paid a huge interest rate factor for doing it. Well, that was because a number of things. One, the market was much higher then than it is now. So that even if you pay a price or a premium because it's an Atlantic City story, in addition to, even though you have the backup from the state payments, that you have to deal with it. But that market was at a time when the city was consciously, openly, and notoriously being discussed as filing for bankruptcy. A plan that establishes financial stability, which we believe absolutely 100%, despite what the state says, this does. And while they can criticize around the edges and the wrinkles, they made no effort to look at this with the context of this plan saving the city. It also saves the state, because it would cost a whole lot more money for the state to do this, and certainly the other alternatives that we all know and nobody wants to talk about are the most expensive way to solve your problems. But having a plan in place, which I told the council from this room a week or so ago, is a tremendous credit positive. If you just have the Municipal Qualified Bond Act program, but no plan, well, then it continues to fester in the bond market as to whether they're secure, notwithstanding the state revenues. And nobody wants to mention bankruptcy, but that threat that hangs over any debt, if that continues now, well, then the representations that are made in this plan are up in the air, because these plans presume the discussions with underwriters, it's critical to them that if there's an approved plan by the state and a Municipal Qualified Bond Act backed bond issue, they will absolutely buy it at the rates that Dennis Enright's firm has projected. We have confirmed that even as of this morning in terms of underwriters who would be prepared to do that. So the point is, we believe, we have respect for Commissioner Richmond and for Tim Cunningham. I think that the effort here wasn't to have this plan reviewed to see if it would work. It was to see what's wrong with it around the edges. And that's what they did. They made a very comprehensive report that we believe didn't come from any diligent, well, not no diligent. They could have asked the firms. They had 3 or 4 critical issues that they suggested that the report didn't convince them because it didn't have the backup with regard to certain things. And it would have been very easy to ask us. Now, whether or not the process from their perspective was we gave them the plan, they have 5 business days to look at it, so they're going to look at it entirely on their own and therefore not get into discussions with us. When they make a decision this significant that affects this city and its future, I think a telephone call would have been easy to do. They didn't do it. So it's stuff like that. So.
A question with the decision, Mayor, and those there being there Thursday, having to be able to sit there as a spectator looking, it seemed like the Judiciary Assembly Committee not accepted it. It was well taken in. Tough questions asked. They seemed to applaud it. Is that decision with the rejection of the takeover plan? Were they involved in it, or is it just DCA and the governor, or whom?
Just DCA.
DCA. Okay.
Mayor, how do you square what Moody said about this and with what the state said about that? I mean, how do you?
I think we back up Moody's report with the statistical information that the state said they do not have.
Please. Just a quick follow-up, Nora, to your question. That's one of the things that I found interesting because if you remember early on through the process, the governor made mention of Moody's credit rating and everything else, but now Moody's come out and say that this plan is robust and seem to embrace it as well as others. Now the state don't want to rely on that when previously they criticized us because Moody gave us a bad report. So the whole thing is just, like I said, they can say one thing, but their actions speak another. Yeah.
Well, they had 5 days after we presented the plan, but the bill says that we had 150 days. So the 150 days ends tomorrow at midnight, and that's why we're going to have the response back before the end of the 150 days. No, 150 days is tomorrow. We're going to give a response because they said that the statements they made, we're saying, is based on a lot of inaccuracies. So we're going to correct those inaccuracies, and we'll give them a day or two to review it, and then we'll determine what the next best decision is for residents of Atlantic City.
Mayor, could we possibly hear from the other experts and their expertise as to who they are and their expertise so that takes the politics out of it and gives it to the experts?
Sure. So there's two issues here. One is the technical part of the plan. The other is policy.
Right.
So they'll be happy to answer any of the technicals. You want to just introduce yourself again?
Yes.
Dennison, please. Michael.
Dennis Enright, I'm a principal in NW Financial. We've been in business for 20 years. We've been in business for 20 years, and we advise municipalities and authorities on bond issuances, primarily in New Jersey. We're one of the leading financial advisors in the Northeast. And we also, through a separate affiliate, we underwrite bonds as well, so we have direct access to market information on prices and what investors desire to buy the bonds.
And I'm Mike Nadal. I'm part of the PFM group that has been working on the recovery plan. We've been focused on the budgetary and fiscal gap closing components of the plan outside of those associated with debt and Bader Field that Dennis and Ed and their teams have been working on. We've been in business for over 40 years. We're one of the largest financial consulting firms in the country. I've worked with a number of distressed municipalities in New York, California, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and have been doing that personally since serving in Philadelphia city government during that local government's recovery from distress in the early 1990s.
What about the idea that the city can't guarantee pilot payments? That seemed to be a new idea. But they couldn't guarantee that the casino, that they would be able to collect the pilot. Any response to that? Is that a reference to Borgata, not withholding under the pilot?
Sure.
So the last member of the team, Joe Bauman, McManaman, Scotland, and Bauman, I think you're referring to the comment by the state that the pilot agreements hadn't been entered into with the various casinos yet. And there's a long list of things in that report which are particularly troubling because they identify item after item that have to happen after the plan's approved. That's an example of an item that comes after the plan is approved. There's a list of probably 12 criticisms in there. Things like we haven't issued the bonds yet for the tax bill refunding. We haven't have a written settlement from Borgata yet. These are all things that were in the plan to be done. And I think that was the point by the city was approve our plan and then we'll show you how we're going to do it. And if along the way we aren't successful in doing it, well then the state can come over and take us in. But give us the chance to make it happen. You can't criticize a plan for not having done things that have to come after the plan's adopted. And that's an example of one of those things.
Mayor, do you have any reason to believe that the state will consider a sort of second submission of the plan?
We're doing what we think is the correct decisions at the correct time. So today, This, I think, is the correct decision. They sent us a report. It is inaccurate. It has false assumptions there, and they've said some of the assumptions is because we didn't provide information. So we're going to address that today.
Have you told DCA that you're going to be doing this?
No, I'm not sure. No, we've not. I received a phone call with the council president from the commissioner yesterday, I want to say about 4:35 in the afternoon, and he said, we're rejecting the plan. I'll give you a couple of reasons why. It'll be electronically sent to you in the next 10 minutes. That was the only conversation.
Mr. Mayor, what would you do about the budget issue? Do you already have a budget?
Yeah, there's a budget for 5 years. They said that they wanted it in the format of a DCA budget, and so we're actually doing that right now. So they'll have the budget in the budget format that they now claim they don't have.
Mr. Mayor, this is a question for you, Council President Small. Do you think, regardless of what you send to the state in terms of the plan, this state is of the mind to say, not going to accept it? Is that on the right? Good question.
Well, a lot of people thought that, we were wasting our time fighting. I didn't think so because, again, it was important to the residents, taxpayers, businesses, and employees of the city of Atlantic City. We have more at stake here, but I'm of the mindset that when something is worth fighting for, regardless of the odds that you're against, especially when you know how disingenuous the people are on the other side, that they're using this for a land grab. It's a heist of Atlantic City to dole out properties and authorities and everything else to their friends. I think it's worth it. And we put forth the best plan possible. Once again, it's the only plan. So to answer your question, DCA came out and said, look, there's no politics involved, whatever. And listen, they might have meant well. At the end of the day, they work for the administration. And as we all know, the governor rules with an iron fist. So we believe it was political, and that's where we are right now. But it was worth fighting for everything. And listen, the fight is going to continue and until it's over and we have no more options. Because, yes.
What were the qualifications of the individuals who made the decision for DCA? Who actually
Commissioner Richmond, who's been a long-time employee, Tim Cunningham is Director of Government Services, so they've been involved in the state for a very long time. And
financial part, when you go through and actually make.
well, they had some consultants. It's in the report, I believe, NASA and Acacia, and I implored the media to just check out the political connections and, fill in the blanks.
Mayor, do you think this was dead on arrival? Mayor, do you think this was dead on arrival?
So I don't have the right to call other people liars, and I'm not doing so at this time. There were representations by people in the administration of this state that said they would look at it with an open mind and that they did not have preconceived notions. I believe that if the plan is still rejected, it will end up in court, and just as you've enjoyed the last 5 weeks of Bridgegate, you will enjoy the representatives that we bring that will be able to testify under law that the statements that have been made are less than truthful.
Mayor, in your opinion, do you think the state would have looked more favorably on this package if it included the real estate tax increase?
Yes, I think they would have looked favored if we raised taxes, but let me start on that one. 6 years. This is what the people of Atlantic City have endured. A 51% increase in their county tax, an 81% increase in their municipal tax, and a 163% increase in their school tax. When you add them all together, it's a 105% increase. If you wanted to balance the budget by doubling the taxes, that's what brings in $100 million, you wouldn't get it, because the people are just going to walk away from their homes or wait for you to throw them out of the homes. But there's no one in Atlantic City can afford a property tax. So yes, I think that was one issue. The second one, I think they really want to destroy the police and fire unions. And the third one is they want to have someone buy the water company. They want to take the water company out of our hands. Yes, I think if it included those three, it would have passed.
Mayor, you told me one time that Ernst & Young
Yes.
So, I mean, if you're saying that their numbers are inaccurate, they're saying their numbers are inaccurate, I mean, is it possible that because they had Ernst & Young in here, that they know the numbers better than?
Oh, no, we're going to go very specifically with the numbers they've given us and be able tomorrow to show. Ernst & Young was here for more than a year. As the council president noted, they spent $2.6 million, the state of New Jersey, to come up with a plan on how to save Atlantic City, and they were supposed to solve an agreement with the Borgata over the tax deal there. They did neither. They replied, we received a report that talked about cutting a cost and increase in income, but it didn't balance the budget and didn't take care of debt.
Mayor, how much of a court fight can the city honestly afford if it comes to that?
So, at this point, we're trying to do what we've been asked to do, provide the correct information, but I don't think the city's going to stand alone, because what you do to Atlantic City, you're going to do to Patterson, you're going to do to Trenton, you're going to do to Newark, you're going to do to every other municipality in the state. And I think the Friends of Atlantic City, the NAACP, the ACLU, the League of Municipalities, the Conference of Mayors will all be joining on a state and national level to help support the people of Atlantic City to fight for their civil rights and our constitutional rights.
Do you think that there's anything that will change between now, the operation of Atlantic City, and when you go through the various options that you have to try to address the issues?
So, I think you have to see that the plan is a living plan. If we find that we can do a service at less cost, we're going to pursue that. We're going to be following how that goes. So we have to stay within the budgets of the plan.
Has it been articulated to the city what exactly will happen with the final rejection?
No, it hasn't.
So you don't know what happens if they're rejected?
No, all the commissioner, I think, you can correct me, he said that they'll decide what part of the takeover. I'm sorry? Yeah, I'm sorry.
The next part of the process by law is they will go to the local finance board and make a determination of what areas of city government they will control, which
Does that happen at a regular meeting of the local finance board, or is it?
Yes, I think the next meeting is November 9th. I don't know if this item is on the agenda, but that will be the next process, and then we'll learn, what parts of, if there's anything left, for us.
What's your
doing
understanding
this.
of their makeup and the favorability towards the city of the local finance board? Have you got any sense of that?
Well, the director of legislative services is the chairman of the local finance board, who was part of reviewing the city's plan.
So basically, in terms of time, are we looking at November 9th as kind of like D-Day in terms of whether you in fact go to court or whatever?
No, well, November 9th is the determination. Before we do anything legally, we have to know what they're going to say. I mean, what their findings are. They can say that we want to come in and take over your finance department. They say, well, we're going to assume control of the governing body and, the mayor, which will make us all figureheads in a sense.
So basically, November 9th is.
No, it's not D-Day, because November 9th, a decision, well, if it's November 9th, if it's on that agenda, I doubt if they would want to drag it on for a month, so there may be some type of special meeting call. I don't know their protocol, but after that, that's when our options open up of any potential legal challenges.
And Warren,
And
would
the-
you guys do anything you absolutely can to avoid this? I mean, the
Yes.
idea of the state coming.
Yes, listen, the idea of the state coming here is daunting. And everyone, every resident, every employee should fear for their lives, because that's what will happen. They're coming here. We did a good job of giving our employees zeros across the board for the next 3 years. What they can, yeah, and what they can do and what they will do is they'll come in here and they'll wreak havoc. There's no security for anyone. They'll raise taxes, and and also it's important to note, look at the state of New Jersey's track record. Look at the school districts they've taken over. Look at the takeover of Camden. I mean, I know they say, Camden's business development is booming through the New Jersey Grow program, but ride through the neighborhoods in Camden and take a look at that. So, you know, it's a saying, if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. And that's failure from the state of New Jersey.
All right, want to take two more questions? Two more questions, sure.
If the review plan, or the answer to the question is rejected again, do you have the money to make your debt payments before the end of the year and to pay others?
So that's a good question. The pilot program that was passed by the Senate, the Assembly, and approved by the governor is in effect now. So the $60 million that's sitting with the ACA, as well as the IATs for this year, need to be sent to the local finance board. They have the right to do it with the commissioner's decision yesterday. So that will provide the funding. If the state refuses to provide that funding to us, then the state's going to be responsible for those parts of the budget that we will not pay.
Does the state even have to consider your revision since you submitted the plan they rejected, like in terms of how the law is written?
You know, we're acting responsibly. They said that they didn't receive enough information. They chose not to ask us about that information, so we're providing it.
So that money
Amy?
is due now, or that they've been holding on to, and does that not just go to pay off the loan?
62 million of it goes to pay off the loan, and the remainder of that should be coming to the city. There's also $26.2 million that we learned for the first time last Monday is coming from transitional aid. Normally, within a few days after they make that determination, a municipality receives it. We've not received it today.
Also, with Bader Field, does anyone want to address that? That seemed to be the crux of the problem with the plan.
Well, it was clear, Joe Bauman, it was clear that one of the cruxes of their problem, of their issues, but it was one that we testified extensively before the Judiciary Committee, if you were there. We're confident that that structure works and makes sense and achieves the dual goal of making sure the water system stays in private hands and addresses the unfunded liabilities, public hands, and addresses the unfunded liabilities, excuse me. The fact of the matter is that was a significant issue that they didn't address, in the sense that if they're not going to monetize, if they're not going to have those funds available to them to balance the budget, where's that money come from? Because there's $110 million worth of obligations that are not addressed in their plan that were meant to be paid for by those funds. So we're confident that that analysis is correct.
Not to oversimplify things, but for the general public, could you explain why selling Bader Field from the city to the municipal authority is not like having poor dad sell to poor mom?
It's two issues to think of. One is, what's the other alternative, right? So could we sell Bader Field to the private sector? We've tried that. It didn't work, and if we would, it wouldn't happen anytime soon. So we want to figure out a way to monetize Bader Field in a way that makes sense, and selling it to the MUA, who has a short-term purpose for it and a possible long-term use for it, made the most sense because it leaves it in public hands until the time when the market returns and that property could possibly be put back in private hands at a much higher value. In terms of how it impacts you, the bottom line is whatever way you monetize one of these assets, the water system or otherwise, it's going to result in higher rates. So in the state's plan stated earlier or before, selling the water system, for example, to a private entity is going to raise the rates. The same way that at some level, the MUA purchasing Bader Field will have to have some impact on rates. That's unavoidable in order to come up with a way to monetize the $110 million. But it's a different class of people. The water rates are much lower than anywhere else in the state. It doesn't impact on the taxpayers, and it's also contemplated by the MUA that will be primarily borne by the commercial sector.
I believe it's 100 cuts would not, 100 workers being cut would not be enough. Do you have any response to that?
The plan targets a further reduction of 100 full-time positions. That's on top of over 350 full-time positions already eliminated since late in 2013. That's 450 positions out of this city's workforce in basically a 4-year period. Those cuts did impact in the years up till now, the very recent years up till now, both police and fire pretty significantly. What's contemplated in the plan is further civilian cuts, that will have resulted in the aggregate of cutting the city's non-public safety workforce in half from where it was about 3 years from today, 3 years ago from today, 4 years or so in total by the time it's fully implemented. Those are very significant cuts in terms of the city's efforts to reduce its workforce. In terms of the numbers in the plan, that's one of those areas that we hope to clarify through the follow-up information. We provided pretty extensive detail around the different assumptions that underlie what the costing is, and we're now in the process of pulling together additional detail so that there's no confusion on those points. But frankly, this is one of the areas in the plan, and we sought to have multiple such areas where the savings estimates associated with closing the identified fiscal gap would be on the conservative side, where there would be a set of assumptions around those that gave the city realistic operational opportunity to make those cuts and achieve the savings that are targeted. So, there was a question, for example, in the DCA review about why the savings estimates associated with headcount reduction were relatively low for 2017. And if we were really cutting 86 people or 100 people, why wouldn't those savings be greater than what we showed? As the plan indicates, but again, we'll provide more detail so that there's no confusion. That's because we took into account that when people leave city employment during that first period of service, there's terminal leave payouts. And there might, in the case of, hopefully there won't be many layoffs, but to the extent that certain service transitions, like the transfer of health and senior services to the county, can't all be accomplished through the early retirement incentive, hopefully those displaced employees will find other opportunities quickly, but we built in a provision for unemployment insurance, recognizing that those kind of transitional costs exist. We factored in that there's a delay in terms of when in the fiscal year some of those changes could take place. Because the ERI process requires a state review period, we assumed July 1 implementation for most employees and a somewhat later implementation for others, again, to make sure this could work in the real world, not just as a spreadsheet exercise, but from an operational perspective. All of those factors, we tried our best to budget conservatively so that, again, the numbers that the city is counting on to balance its budget can be achieved, are realistic and defensible, and that's the kind of thing we hope to explain in more detail to address the technical concerns that state surface.
Were you think the state was disappointed that you guys had 100 employees on there, but there weren't more police and firemen included?
I'll be happy.
I don't know how they could be, because it's the state of New Jersey through the DCA that sent Don Huber, a former fire chief, to Atlantic City to downsize our fire department to the correct size and to address how many administrative positions we have. And we followed all of those recommendations about 2 years ago. Then the state of New Jersey, through the DCA, sent Rick Riccadelli to Atlantic City after several months. He had recommended downsizing the police department, I want to say from like 330 to 285, about 45 positions. We did that. He also set up an administrative position. We did that as well. And then I have to tell you, although the IFF contract went into arbitration, the PBA and the senior officers' contracts did not, but they met all of the standards of the IFF, and it was the local finance board that actually chimed in and approved those contracts. We want to thank you. We are going to be available for another 15, 20 minutes for individual.
One more question.
Yes, sure.
They rejected the plan based on missing information. You're providing that information to them. Does the commission have any kind of obligation to review your resubmission quickly, or what kind of time frame do you anticipate for them to review the information you provide to them?
Someone else?
I think if the state wants to take a serious look at our plan they'll take the time to review the supplement. If they don't want to take a serious look at our plan, they won't. It'll come down to that. What is their view on it? Do they want to analyze the plan? If there was missing information, now they can have it and make a careful, thoughtful, educated decision. They'll look at it. If that's not their intent, then they won't.
So when you provide this information to them, is this actually an invitation for them to enter into conversation with you?
That invitation has existed before, has existed now, and will continue to exist.
All right, guys, thank you very much. Thank you.